This video will contain spoilers for the entire Zero Escape trilogy. If you haven't yet played these games, I highly recommend doing so before you have any spoilers. 9 Hours, 9 Persons, 9 Doors, released in Japan in 2009. It's a visual novel mystery thriller, but didn't do very well commercially. After a survey asked those who chose not to purchase the game why they made their decision, there seemed to be a consensus that the game appeared to be too intense. However, the game was much more successful in the West. Why was it not viewed as being that dark in English-speaking countries compared to Japan? The reason may lie in the title of the game itself. See, the number 9 is viewed as a cursed number in Japan. It's a superstition stemming from the pronunciation of the number, nothing to do with historical context similar to the number 13 in Western culture. The number 9 in Japanese is pronounced Q. This number has become a superstition because the Q sound is incredibly similar to ku, which means such things as despair, pain, and suffering. So the reason why 999 may have been viewed as too scary or intense in Japan is because of the sound the title makes and the dark themes associated with it. But how does that all tie into the title of this video? I'm sure you've already figured it out, but that sound, Q, is the same sound that makes the letter Q in English. In a way, the letter Q and the number 9 are parallels that represent the major themes of the Zero Escape series. They are both incredibly prominent symbols that appear in all three games, and more often than not, are a major part of the game as a whole. In 999, we first see the letter Q in an unexpected place, where we think it's supposed to be a 9. On a note from Zero, the game master, he explains that the characters trapped in a death game must reach a door with a 9 on it to escape. At least, that's what the players think. In reality, it's not a 9 at all, but rather a lowercase q. The typography of these two symbols look incredibly similar, so it's understandable why they would get mixed up. And with 9 total people and 9 hours remaining, why would anyone think that's not a number 9 on the note? As we know, the number 9 has a lot of bad connotations in Japan. However, there can be other meanings applied to it in a base 10 context. It's the final digit in the sequence, representing fulfillment and success. Many hold it as a sacred number with magical properties, and although a number may not be magical, there are many things about the number 9 that make it unique. I mean, take for example the fact that you could multiply 9 with any number, and then add all the digits together to get 9. 9 times 2, 18. 1 plus 8 is 9. 9 times 123, 1107. 1 plus 1 plus 0 plus 7 is still 9. I could go on, but the point is, 9 is an incredibly unique digit. But wait, remember how I explained that the characters thought the Q was a 9 because of how it was written lowercase on the note? It's actually different in the original Japanese version of 999. That was a change made in localization because in the original, Zero actually gives these instructions through the speakers, out loud. Remember how the number 9 in Japanese is pronounced Q? Well, that sound is, of course, nearly identical to the letter of the alphabet. In both versions, the characters are chasing what they believe to be a 9, or Q, door, but are really heading towards the exit labeled with the 17th letter of the alphabet, Q. But why is the door labeled so? In truth, the building that the players escape from is named Building Q. The reason for this is still unknown, but it most likely has something to do with the experiment on morphogenetic field theory that was being held there. Because of that, the door is labeled Q and will open with a combination of numbers equaling 8. The concept of bases is used a few times throughout 999 and again with this final door. If we keep going up by bases until we get to Q in base 27, the letter will be equal to 26 in base 10, and the digits of 26 equal 8, therefore opening the door with a combination of digits that add to 8. If we take that idea of adding digits together though, known as finding the digital root, we will see that, although base 27 is important to finding Q and exiting, the base's digits can be added together to get a 9. It's all a cycle that goes back to the number 9 and the letter Q. A cycle of pain, suffering, endings, fulfillment, and ultimately, death. It's also a cycle of starting anew, finding hope, and claiming the future for yourself. That is what lies at the heart of Zero Escape, and is a beautifully real and pervasive theme that gives these characters strength in their darkest times. However, that's only the first of 3 games in the Zero Escape trilogy. The letter Q is a theme throughout the whole series, and appears in the second game, Virtue's Last Reward. There are some time travel shenanigans that happen, and the game is set in 2074, after the destruction of the world itself. Virtue's Last Reward takes place on the moon, the final frontier. Remember, 9, and in turn Q, represents suffering, much like the people on Earth experienced when going through an apocalyptic situation, and finality, the end of something, just as this is the furthest that the Zero Escape timeline ever goes, and is most likely the end of humanity. At the start of the game, the protagonist, Sigma, wakes up to find someone he's never met before. It's a girl named Phi. She's smart, cunning, and mysterious. She becomes an incredibly important character and one of the Zero Escape mainstays, but her name could have foreshadowed just how key she really was. To understand this, we need to go a long way back, all the way to the 19th century BC. Around 4,000 years ago, the Canaanites in Egypt adapted hieroglyphs to create one of the first ever known written alphabets, known as the Proto-Sinaitic script. One character in that alphabet is known as Qaf, meaning needle, and looks like this. This symbol may not look familiar yet, but it will soon enough. So, around 900 years after the Proto-Sinaitic script, it would eventually morph into the Phoenician alphabet in 1050 BC. This alphabet would be more widely used than its ancestor script and would spread around the Mediterranean. It kept aspects of its older text, but changed other parts of it around to better fit the needs of the time. They changed the symbol of Qaf to look like this, but kept the meaning of needle. This symbol might start to look more familiar if you know your Greek. After spreading around the Mediterranean, this symbol would be adopted by the early Greek alphabet and become Kopa, a letter to denote the K sound. This letter would then go on to be used by the modern Greek alphabet as Phi. Exactly, those are the origins of the letter and the namesake of the character. But how is this all relevant? Why discuss the origins of Phi? Let me explain. If we back up to before the modern Greek alphabet and look at the early one, we find that Kopa was the origins of the Phi character. However, if we divert away from modern Greek, we discover that Kopa actually became, that's right, the letter Q in Latin, and eventually English. These two are inseparably connected just by the way that they were formed. Q represents Phi, and Phi represents Q. And by the Japanese pronunciation of Q and 9, we can even connect Phi to the number that represents the series as a whole. Phi embodies the themes of the series, and along with Sigma, aims to change the course of history from an end to a new beginning. She is undeniably human and longs for a better world, even if she doesn't know if it can really happen. At the end of the day, Zero Escape is about these people coming together against impossible odds and changing the course of history for a hopeful future, perfectly represented by the letter Q, showing us a hopeless reality full of pain, but giving us the chance to move forward and make it a fulfilling, ambitious one. And just as the Q door is at the end of 999, the finale of Virtue's Last Reward features an entire escape room named Q. The name comes from the fact that it houses the quantum computer, a machine that powers the entire facility and runs the nonary game that the players are trapped in. It is, once again, the final boss of sorts, controlling the actions of the characters. Upon entering the room, we are greeted with nothing but a white void and a door. Once the escape starts, a cube floats out of the floor and allows us to interact with the walls of the room. The look and feel of this room is unlike anything else in the series, and really sets in stone how important this letter is to the franchise. Featuring more difficult versions of previous puzzles, and arguably one of the most challenging puzzles in the series, Q forces the player to think outside of the box to escape the box that they're trapped in. The overbearing white walls and tight room make it clear this is not a place you want to be in for long. You must move past it and overcome the final tests of your will to even have a chance at changing that hopeless future you so desperately wish to escape from. And again, that is the essence of Q. The side of suffering and pain, but also a side of finality and success. Finally, that brings us to Zero Time Dilemma. Here, an entire third of the cast falls under the Q category, known as Q Team. This team of characters consists of entirely new characters to the series: Eric, Mira, a young boy who the player first believes to be named Q, and finally, a secret fourth character not revealed until the end of the game. In actuality, that fourth character is the one named Q, and the young boy is named Sean. Misdirection and camera framing tricks the player into believing that Sean is actually named Q, but clever bits of foreshadowing point towards that not being the case. The one really known as Q is revealed to be an old man in a wheelchair, and the true mastermind behind the final game in the series. Q, whose real name is Delta, is the son of Sigma. He is Phi's twin brother, sent far back in time when he was born, making him much older. As established earlier, Q and Phi have the same root in the Phoenician alphabet, and now even have the same root as characters in the Zero Escape series, being siblings. He is not only the creator of the events in Zero Time Dilemma, but also had a hand in the creation of every game in the series and the events that unfolded in them. He funded the original nonary game featured in 999. He orchestrated the release of Radical 6, the virus that would end the world and start Virtue's Last Reward. Q is the catalyst of the Zero Escape series. Q is also the core theme of these games that represents death and life. This is a quote from Delta himself and shows how he views the world, but he's also the one that allowed the decision game in Zero Time Dilemma to happen. The decision game that he made to create a new timeline in which no one is hurt. Life is unfair, sure, but there is hope to change that life into something better. That is the true meaning of Q and the heart of the Zero Escape series. Throughout these games, Q represents a final challenge blocking the way between you and your future. In 999, the ominous incinerator door misdirects the player and traps them in a deadly situation. In Virtue's Last Reward, the final escape room lies between you and the chance of going back to before the world was ever tarnished by an apocalyptic virus. In Zero Time Dilemma, the final challenge of Delta, or rather Q, is not only the brother of Phi, making sense considering the origins of the letters, but he is also the one that would mastermind everything and allow it to happen. He created the decision game that would change the future of humanity permanently. No one alphabet letter, nay, no theme in storytelling is quite like the letter Q in Zero Escape. It's so prominent in every game and gives meaning to hope in the face of true suffering. It puts the human condition into context and crafts a truly unique use of a single alphabet letter that can't be described as anything less than ingenious.